Here's the Rainbow Sampler Wooden Embroidery Kit from Lucky Jonquil by Bella. Let me show you what comes in this full embroidery kit. First, you get the pre-patterned stitch disc with all 6 foundational embroidery stitches. You get the instructions. You'll get 2 needles. And then you'll get 6 full skeins of premium embroidery floss, and then an adhesive backing to cover up your back stitches. Let's get stitching and start with the back stitch. We need to thread our needle first. I am using 6 strands of thread, and I like to pinch my thread between 2 fingers and then take the needle and slide it down over the top, and that's how I like to thread my needle. You can use a needle threader. I am using 24 inches of thread here. And then go ahead and come up through your first hole. And I'm not going to tie a knot on the back to secure this thread. I'm going to go down through the second hole, and then I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to pull the working thread down, and then I'm going to cross the tail over that, and then I'm going to go back up into the third hole. And you're going to see that kind of pins that tail down, and it is secure. So you can see here, I can pull that and it's secure. And then I'm going to continue on. So go back down in the last stitch hole and then come back up in the next opening. And then you're going to go back down in the last stitch. Just keep repeating this pattern until you complete all the back stitches in this row. Once you reach the end, you're going to want to secure your thread. So I'm going to finish this stitch, flip this over, and I'm going to take my working thread and I am going to go underneath a few of those stitches, kind of wrapping those back stitches. And this will secure that thread. You can tie a knot if that's your preference. Just keep in mind that you'll be putting that adhesive sticker on the back to cover all the back threads, so the less bumpy, the flatter that sticker will lay down. Let's move on to the stem stitch. I went ahead and changed thread colors. Come up through the first hole, and this first stitch is going to be different than all the other stitches in this row. So you're going to go down into the third opening. I'm just hanging on to that tail in the back. Go ahead and go down through the third opening. Leave a loop out, and you're going to see I secure that kind of out with my thumb. And then come back up in between both of those stitches. And then pull it tight. But the next stitch, you're not going to skip one. You're going to go right into the next opening. So go down into the next opening. You're going to leave a loop out again, and then come up in the middle between those 2 stitches, your working thread, and then pull that tight. And you're going to do the same thing. Go down into the next opening, leave a loop out, come up through the middle, and then pull this tight. And you can see that it creates a rope looking pattern with your thread. Just keep repeating this pattern of stitching until you get to the end of this row. And then once you're at the end, you can see here, I'm going to come back up through the middle of my working thread, pull that tight, and then I'm just going to take my needle and go down into that last hole. And then you can decide how you'd like to secure that thread on the back. Now let's move on to the chain stitch. Go ahead and change your thread color if you'd like. Come up through that bottom hole. Again, I'm holding on to the tail. And then you are going to go back down the same hole you just came up. Leave a loop out. I'm going to hold it with my thumb just to secure it, and then come up through the next hole, and then you're going to catch that loop. And you can pull it snug, not too snug. And then you're going to go back down the same hole that you just came up, but you're going to leave a loop out. And see how this loop is wanting to twist? You definitely want to make sure your loops stay straight, or this stitch gets a little bit wonky. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to stabilize it with my thumb, come back up through the next hole, catching that loop, and then I'm going to pull it tight. And then go back down inside of that chain, the same hole that you just came up. See how I'm using my thumb to stabilize all of that too? And then I'm going to leave a loop out, come up through the next opening, catching that loop, and then pulling it tight. So just go ahead and repeat that same pattern all the way till you get to the end. When you get to the end, it is a little bit different on how you finish off the stitch. I'll show you here. So you're going to come up through your loop, pull your loop tight, not that tight. I'm going to loosen that up. And instead of going back down inside of that chain, you are going to go over the top of that chain. So see how I'm going around it and then going back down. So you're anchoring the stitch. We're going to anchor that chain down. And that's your chain stitch. Let's move on to the woven wheel. It is crucial that you start with this stitch on the right hand side of this disc. If you don't, you chance snagging the other stitches with your needle. To begin, come up through the center of your pattern, and then you're going to go down into one of the spokes. And you're going to do this all the way around. Come up through the center, go down through a spoke. And then once you have all these spokes in place, this is what or how you're going to create the woven part of your wheel. You're going to weave your thread in and out of these spokes. So once you have all the spokes made, come up through the center, and then you're going to choose one of the spokes to go under. So I'm going to go under this one, and because I went under that one, the next one I'll go over. So you're going to do under, over, under. So under, over, and then under the next one. You'll want to keep track of where you're at. I just went under the spoke. So now the next one will be over and then under. This can get tricky toward the end when your woven wheel is full of thread and harder to see where you're at with your pattern. So just start to pay attention as your woven wheel fills up. So I went under, over, under. Once you get toward the end and your flower or woven wheel is really full, you'll want to cover up those outside stitch holes. You can do that by either filling it in more or lightly tugging your outside threads with your needle. This is something you want to do really gently. And then once you're done covering your holes, just go down into the stitch hole that's closest to your working thread, and then you can secure that off in the back, however you choose. You definitely want to finish all the woven wheels before moving on to the other two stitch types, and that's just to help you avoid a lot of snagging. Let's start the lazy daisy stitch next. Go ahead and come up through the bottom hole. You're going to do a back stitch all the way up to the bottom of that top leaf. And then once you get to the bottom of the top leaf, you are going to come back up through that hole. So I'm going to come up through the bottom of the leaf now that my back stitching is done, and I'm going to go back down that same hole, but I'm going to leave a loop out. So leave a loop out and then go up through the top of your leaf. The loop is trying to twist. You do not want to twist a loop or your stitch will look funny. So I'm going to straighten that loop, come up through the top of the leaf, and now I'm going to catch that loop with my needle and then pull it tight, not too tight. And then to anchor that down, you're going to go around the top of that chain and back down into the top of that hole. And then it anchors that down. And then come up at the bottom of the next leaf, go back down the bottom of that leaf, leave a loop out. This loop is spinning. You definitely don't want that. Anchor it down with your thumb. and then come up through the top of your leaf with your needle and catch that loop and pull it tight. And then anchor down the top of that lazy daisy stitch, go around the chain and back down the top leaf hole. Come up through the other side at the bottom of your leaf, go back down that same hole, leave a loop out, come up through the top of that leaf, catching the loop that you left out, and then anchor the top of that leaf or chain down by going around it and then back down into the same hole you just came up. And that's how you do the lazy daisy stitch. Let's move on to the Colonial Knot. You're going to do some more back stitching to cover up the stem part of these flowers. And you can see here that it's not just a straight back stitch, that there are some flowers that veer off to the sides. So just pay attention while you're stitching. Before starting the Colonial Knot, tie a knot in your working thread at the very end. This will help you from pulling your thread all the way through. Go ahead and come up through one of your holes, and then you're going to make a backward C with your thread. And you're going to take your needle, put it inside that C, and angle it up. And then you're going to take your working thread and wrap your needle, and see how it makes like a little 8, a crazy 8. Pull that tight, and then go back down inside the same hole you just came up. And then my knot here is a little sloppy. I want you to see that. This is not easy. It's not hard, but it's not easy. It's a muscle memory thing. So a backward C, angling my needle inside and up. I'm going to wrap my needle with the working thread to make a little crazy 8. I'm going to pull that tight, and I'm going to go back down the same hole I came up. This knot looks a little bit better. And we'll do it again. We're going to come up through the next open pattern hole. We're going to make a backwards C. I'm going to do it with my needle, and then I'm going to angle my needle up, and then I'm going to wrap my needle to make a crazy 8 shape. I'm going to pull it tight and then go back down the same hole I just came up. If you struggle with these, give yourself grace. This is not always the easiest stitch for everybody to learn. There is lots of opportunity to practice this stitch as you fill in all of the holes on this pattern. And there is your completed rainbow sampler. The last step is covering up these less than desirable looking back stitches. Go ahead and take the white sticker that came in your kit, peel the brown backing away from that velvety side, and then you're going to strategically place that down, covering up all of those back stitches. And you can see that I had a little piece of pink thread hanging out. I just tucked that in and then continued to flatten this. So just smooth this out the best that you can. And once you have that all smoothed down, you have a completed rainbow sampler.